today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about
how to retrain your mind so that you say the right thing instead of going with that overriding feeling that messes everything up. Emotional ownership is about managing and understanding your emotions, but it's about more than that. How much we hang out in one part of our brain versus another determines how we're going to react in a tough situation. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. I'm your host, and today we're talking about managing your reactions to steer your relationship's direction. And really what this is about is it's about your mind. When we feel out of control, when we feel like our emotions have us rather than the other way around, it's because something has become weak in our brain. Actually, it's not just our mind. So what we're going to explore in this episode is how to retrain our brain, strengthen our mind so that emotions don't totally get a grip on us, so that we can manage our emotions. Have you ever felt like your emotions own you? Emotional ownership is about managing and understanding your emotions, but it's about more than that. It's also about getting that your brain is like any other muscle in your body, right? Your brain is actually made up of multiple kinds. There are multiple kinds, areas in your brain is what they call them. But I'd almost describe them as different muscles in your brain that have different reasons. Just like you have arm muscles for lifting and leg muscles for walking, there are parts of our brain that deliver pleasure, parts of our brain that deliver pain, parts of our brain that manage danger, parts of our brain that keep rational and help us stay focused. And how much we hang out in one part of our brain versus another determines how we're going to react in a tough situation, like those ones that keep coming up at home, like those ones where you feel like you're totally out of control. And the reason why you feel like you're out of control is imagine that you don't go downstairs. You don't walk downstairs. You hardly walk. Imagine that you spend your time in a wheelchair just rolling around. And then one day you decide to get up and run down a flight of stairs. And what you find is your legs are so atrophied that you end up falling down the stairs out of control. That's what's happening in your relationship. What's happening in your relationship is there are certain parts of your brain that you're just not exercising enough. And if you exercise them some more, you would build up the strength and the energy to manage those highly emotional moments that right now seem like they just own you. And the impact of that is that you're saying things that feel like self-sabotage. You hear them doing the same thing, by the way. This is very rarely one-sided. It's very rarely that the other person has got total management of self, and they're married to someone who's all over the place. Very rare. Usually elephants marry elephants, and hippos marry hippos, and giraffes marry giraffes, right? Usually we're in a relationship with someone who's working with the same challenges in terms of their brain and emotions that we are. Not the same, but similar. And I'm talking about particularly when it comes to managing our emotions and expressing them. Right. So this whole series that we're doing right now is all about that, all about the traps that keep us in that emotional wheelchair, going back to the metaphor of falling down the stairs. So the first piece of this is, what are we doing with our brain now? Why is it that certain parts of our brain are built up and other ones aren't? And the key to this lies in the fact that we aren't fully conscious. In our culture, there's a lot of emphasis on looks. There's a lot of emphasis on the what success looks like. There's a lot of emphasis on having a body that looks good. If you watch anything on screens right now, 90% of it shows people who are in good physical condition. It shows people who are having a certain kind of financial success. It shows people who have certain possessions, but rarely does it show people who are managing themselves. Those people are usually presented as aberrations. They might even be presented as being emotionally disconnected and undesirable. In fact, we might classify them as sociopaths or close to sociopaths. This is not about being disconnected from our feelings, our emotions. It's not about bottling them up so that we can take over with our will. It's about having a strong enough will and having exercised parts of our brain enough so that we can express our emotions in a way that's healthy and safe for our partner and feels good for us. Really, it's about a lesson we all need to learn, which is in order to have a crack-a-lackin' body like they put on the screens, we're going to need to exercise certain parts of our mind, right? In order to have the discipline to or care or to apply our mind is a better way to put it. Discipline sounds so scary. In order to apply our mind in a way so that we're careful about what we're eating and we're careful about what we're exercising, we need to what? We need to apply our mind, all right? And so I want you to get this, that what we're doing here is we're talking about applying our mind to our emotional state so that we can not only approach our partnership, but our whole life in a more balanced way, in a way that feels like we're not sabotaging ourselves, like we are helping ourselves. So you remember I was talking about on the screens, what goes on is they show us mad financial success, six-pack abs. I'm talking from a guy's point of view, perfectly shaped body if you're a woman. They show us people who say whatever they want and have success. And we get hooked on that. Our brain gets hooked on that. Our limbic system, which triggers our brain's emotional center, gets hooked on it. Our limbic system is the part of our brain that is key to pain and pleasure. Big picture, right? What's going on here is when we feel like we're not completely adequate, or we feel like we're not getting what we want, more and more we're turning to screens for that. Maybe we're turning to screens to go to social media and see how other people are succeeding. Or maybe what we're going to do is have a success and we're going to post, oh, check out my car. Or maybe we're on vacation. Oh, look at our mad vacation. Maybe these, whatever it is, we're getting our hits of dopamine. Dopamine is what our brain releases when we feel good. The limbic system releases when we feel good, both by seeing things on screen that give us pleasure and by projecting things on screen that give us pleasure. Some people get hits of dopamine by watching naked bodies. Pornography there's a huge pornography addiction going on for many men because there's an instant hit of dopamine that comes every time they go to pornography. It's shown that many women, rather than go to pornography, though some do, will spend money on Amazon or other places and get that same hit of dopamine. There are a lot of articles out there today that say that spending is for women as pornography is for men. And the reason why we're culturally drawing these parallels is because men and women find themselves using their screens in order to get a hit of dopamine, feel good in the short term, without thinking about what is pornography doing to my sex life with my partner? What is spending doing to my wallet, to my future? It's about the short-term hit at the expense of the long-term future. And when we do that, we're also growing the parts of our brain that are hooked on pain and pleasure instead of the parts of our brain that are rational, goal-oriented, that would take, if what we want is to have enough money to just buy things without thinking about it, instead of buying things without thinking about it and having it feel painful when we get our credit card bill, then there are certain goals and achievements and actions that will lead us to having the income so that buying something is not painful to our financial future. Or if we want to have a sex life that's off the charts with our partner, that's something we need to work on. We need to have a focus on it. We need to be able to create emotional intimacy with them And by creating an environment that's safe, trusting, and emotionally intimate, then we can have sex that's off the charts, because really that's what that's about. It isn't just physical, it's the connection between mind, body, and emotion. So the message that I'm trying to get across to you here is that when we escape into a fantasy world through a relationship with an AI, through playing video games, through watching genres of movies, through posting, through purchasing, through pornography, whatever screen activity you can think of that has an addictive quality to it and takes us out of ourselves. When we do that, we develop one part of our brain at the expense of the part that's actually going to give us what we really want. And so the decision every human being who wants a happy and fulfilling relationship needs to make is, where is my attention, and what part of my brain am I exercising? And just like having that body with the six-pack abs or whatever requires regular application of willpower and time, so does the development of our brain. Regular application. So let me give you some ideas of what kind of applications, and we can talk about the time. Have you noticed that focusing on something consistently shapes how you think and respond to it? I'm telling you, where we put our attention develops that part of our brain and the ability to respond thoughtfully in relationships. We want to strengthen neural pathways with consistent attention in the same way that we've been strengthening neural pathways through game playing, spending, pornography, mindless movies of violence, mindless movies of love, interacting with an artificial intelligence. Maybe you've developed an AI that helps you feel less alone. In the same way that those develop certain neural pathways, when we focus on mindful activities rather than distractions, we cultivate resilience. When we focus on mindful, consciously aware activities, we develop patience. When we focus on things mindfully and consciously make choices, we give a message to our unconscious mind that there's a place that we want to go, a way that we want to develop ourselves. And I want to be really clear, there's a difference between moving away from and moving towards. Very often what we do is we say, oh my God, I need to lose weight, I'm going to move away from it. Oh my God, I need to get away from pornography, I'm going to do this. Oh my God, I need to get away from spending, this is what I need to do. What we want to do really is we want to have a goal of where we are going to go. Because when we get far enough from the pain, we lose our motivation. When pain becomes the motivator for change, when we move away from the pain, we get less motivated. But when we choose a goal, and that goal represents an alignment of our values, an alignment of our emotional needs, and an alignment of our sense of purpose of who we are pulled to it. It pulls us to it. Inexorably is the word I have very rarely used but love to. Inexorably, meaning there's no fighting it. It's natural. It's normal. And the way to do that is to develop our mind, regularly setting aside screens to focus on conversations with your partner, or even time with yourself, or with a coach, or with a therapist, or with a rabbi, a pastor, anyone who you're going to have a constructive conversation that's going to give you feedback and give you information that's going to help you develop yourself, is going to build pathways. It's going to build pathways for learning, pathways for empathy, pathways for connection, pathways for patience, rather than pathways for instant gratification that degrade the parts of your brains that help you to follow through and to complete and to do. Or when we develop those pathways to instant gratification, we become more irritable. We become more impulsive. And when our partner triggers us, says something that touches a sore spot for us, if we've been living in the world of impulsivity, guess what happens? We give in to the first impulse that comes up. We've been satisfying an impulse for gratification. And so We satisfy the impulse for destructive behavior that trashes our relationship and that we feel terrible about afterwards. The tools for this are first recognizing that you have a limited amount of strength over the course of the day that will help you focus. And you want to build that strength up. Also, though, you want to recognize when you're coming to the end of it. Our tendency is to think that we have a limitless wealth that we can draw on for decision making, a limitless well that we can draw on for patience, a limitless well for focus. But the truth is, we only have as big a well as we've built up through placing our attention in that part of our brain that does that, the cerebral cortex or the prefrontal cortex, that we only have a certain amount of energy based on how well we slept, how much stress is going on in our lives in general, it might be at work, parental, or in your relationship. We only have as much energy as we've been eating and taking care of our body properly. That's an important part of it. That feeds the amount of energy we have available. Ways that we can build that energy up and that we can grow our prefrontal cortex or our cerebral cortex are in mindfulness, meditation, and prayer. And I want to talk about those more in depth today. And also, just like gym time, these are not things that we do once a week or a couple of times a month. These need to be things that we do 3, really ideally at least 4 times a week. Now, there's a variation of studies that tell how much time you need to do these things for. But the truth is, if you start to make one or all of these practices regular, you're going to start to see, even if it's just a few minutes a day, you're going to start to see a shift in where your attention is, because that part of your brain is going to grow. Or a better way to put it is those neural pathways are going to develop more, while the parts of the brain that are plugged into the limbic system, they won't atrophy because you always need them. But because you'll have less attention there, they'll subside is probably a better way to put it. It's the same metaphor would be if you're rolling around on that wheelchair and you want to get to the point where you can run down the stairs. The first thing you want to do is stand up. If you just stand up in the wheelchair a couple of times a day, your legs are going to be stronger. If you stand up and walk a few feet, they'll be stronger still. If you stand up and walk down a step and then back up a step, stronger still. If you stand up and walk down 5 steps and back down 5 steps and up 5 steps, stronger still. And you want to build up to that. So that's why I say in the beginning, right, you need to get that you're changing a habit. We've all been in the habit of allowing our limbic system, the need to use our limbic system to feel instant gratification. All of us, I love instant gratification. I'm a total gratification junkie, and it's taken a lot of work to say I will allow myself gratification at certain times. We'll talk about that more in a minute, instead of instantly. All of us need to build up, choose to back burner instant gratification and build up attention on mindfulness, being conscious in the moment, making conscious choices instead of allowing our limbic system to make the choices for us unconsciously. And we need to do it in small steps. We're building a new habit. We're setting aside the habit of, oh, I don't feel so good. Let's look at something. I don't feel so good. Let's talk to my AA. I don't feel so good. Let's play a game. I don't feel, we're setting aside a negative habit and we're building up a new habit of, I want my attention to be in my rational mind. I want to be thinking before I act. I want to be proactive, not reactive. Have you ever felt like you're going through the motions instead of truly being present with your partner? Mindfulness brings awareness to each moment. And we're going to start with mindfulness because how many times, when I say going through the motions, how many times have you been with your partner? It's date night. Maybe you've got date night going on. I know I do. I want to tell you, my wife and I have the most amazing date nights. And being completely honest and transparent, we do have the most amazing date nights. But it takes a few minutes for us to get present in the room together. It takes a few minutes for us to stop thinking about what was that text message. It takes a few minutes for us to stop wondering about the people around us. It takes a few minutes for us to think about, stop thinking, did I tie up all the loose ends at work? And really be mindful in the moment. And we do it. We work at it now. When we first started having date night, we had very little control over it, but we made a conscious choice that date night was going to be a no phone night. We made a conscious choice that we were not going to talk about work and that we were only going to talk about what's going on with each of us. And I'm going to tell you in the beginning, there were a lot of date nights where we didn't talk much at all. And that was okay because we were starting a new habit. Over time, through both of us deciding that we were going to be in the moment with each other, not thinking about something else, not worrying about something else, not wondering about something else, not waiting to get to that next limbic system hit, that date night started to become meaningful. We started to build connection. So mindfulness is nothing more than being in the moment. It might be savoring the taste of something. Mindfulness is nothing more than being aware of what's going on in your body, what's going on in the room around you, rather than somewhere in your head, which is where most of us spend and have spent a lot of our time. Somewhere in our head, in our limbic system, in our imagination, not in our cerebral cortex, conscious, present. And that's a discipline, all right? Mindfulness is probably the best way to practice it is when you go out on date night and you start to think about work. This is what works for me. A thought comes up about a client and you say, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to need to attend to that after date night. Or I'm going to need to attend to that tomorrow morning. Mental note to self. So the first step is to just notice what comes up, thank it for being present, acknowledge it, and let your mind make a mental note to take care of it when you're done with date night. And once you've dismissed enough of these thoughts, you can be in the moment, really listening. Other tools that will help with date night, for example, being mindful. We've talked about I statements a lot, but committed listening is huge here. Committed listening is when you're listening to your partner so closely that you're listening for the emotion of what's going on for them and you're listening for facts. And so you can check in to see if you're really listening by saying, sounds like, it seems like, it feels like, it looks like what you're saying is, you feel this way because that happened. Did I get that? And they'll tell you if you got it. If you didn't get it, maybe you're not as present as you'd like to be, or maybe you just need to learn to listen more closely. You're pretty present, but you need to really pay attention. Or maybe you don't know them as well as you thought you do, but now that you know them better, next time you'll hear them better. Mindfulness you can do at any time, in any place. Mindfulness, I like to practice mindfulness when I'm doing garden work, when I'm working on my home, really focusing on a task at hand. Am I focusing on the task or am I distracted? And what I find is when I'm distracted, I don't do the task as well. But when I'm really looking at, okay, I was working on my roof the other day. Is this truly level? This needs to be built up a little more. And when I'm mindful, I'm not as messy. When I'm mindful, the work is more precise. When I'm mindful, there's a pride of workmanship that happens. The next step for rewiring our brain is meditation. Meditation is very similar to mindfulness, except that there are forms of meditation. A classic form of meditation is contemplative meditation, the sort of a Western view on it. You might sit in a comfy chair and think about a problem or a challenge in your life and think about it from a lot of different people's perspectives. It's about getting out of your own head. Let's say that you have a problem with your partner. She tells you that you are a narcissistic jackass who puts work before children. And that created a huge fight. So in your contemplating of that situation, maybe you can't yet see her point of view, but maybe you take on the point of view of what would your mother say? Or you take on the point of view of your boss, or you take on the point of view of Gandhi, or you take on the point of view of whatever heroes you have in your life, and you start looking at the relationship. You start looking at your own relationship with your work and your children through the eyes of other people. That's a form of meditation. And it's also a great practice in terms of emotional intelligence, because by trying to see, and eventually you want to see things through the eyes of your partner, by the way, by trying to see things through the eyes of other people, by imagining what it's like to be that person, you actually build your emotional intelligence. And it takes your cerebral cortex plus other parts of your brain to do that. Your cerebral cortex is the driver, but you're using other parts of your brain to imagine that. And you're going to start to get different perspectives on your life. And the value of seeing your own life through different people's eyes is surreal. Another form of meditation, classic Zen meditation, very similar to the mindfulness exercise I gave you. You're just trying to be in the moment, counting your own breath. Just sitting. All you want to do is just sit and count your own breath. That's the most basic Zen exercise. There are yogic exercises which involve reciting something over and over. There are Christian meditation exercises that involve reciting something over and over and contemplating a prayer, the serenity prayer, or any prayer you like, and looking at it again from different points of view. There's all kinds of meditations, from just stilling yourself in a mindful way to looking at your life, looking at a situation, like taking a prayer and examining a situation through the lens of that prayer. These are all forms of engaging your cerebral cortex in different ways. Now, prayer is kind of like the grand finale of all that. And the difference is that prayer, when executed properly, can be a form of self-hypnosis. Prayer starts out as self-examination. You're talking to, when you're praying, you're presumably talking to a higher power, an all-powerful being that has influence on you, as much influence as you allow it to have. And you're asking for help. Maybe what you're doing is praying affirmatively because it's an all-powerful, all-knowing being who has access to you, and you've allowed it to have influence and change your life. Maybe you're thanking that all-knowing being for the change that's already happening. Maybe you're imagining who you are once that change has happened in you. Let's go back to the example of you're focusing on your work too much and not enough on your children. Maybe you're thanking your higher power that you've become someone who balances the concerns of your family with the concerns of your work. And you start to imagine, what would that look like in terms of time? How would I still perform, be a top performer at work and become a top performer with my children? Who would I be? What values would be up on top? You start to actually feel like you are that person. And through prayer, you actually connect with that person you are yet to show that you are. Prayer, in some ways, can be the grand finale of mindfulness meditation and prayer. The way I see it, and I'm explaining it, mindfulness is a basic daily practice of being present in the moment. Meditation is taking that being present in the moment practice and also applying the ability to see things through different perspectives. And prayer is the ability to consolidate all of that into a projection of who you might be once you apply the insights that you have from mindfulness and meditation when done in the way that I'm describing. And all of that, excuse me, got a frog in my throat. All of that takes time. It starts with a simple practice, and it's something you build up over time. So some practical ways to do this. First, you want to set some boundaries with screen. I mean, do you want to reduce reactivity in your relationship? You need to start by taking the hook out of your mouth and being less reactive to that part of you that's saying, do that thing, whatever it is. Pornography. I'm going to throw out pornography because that's an addiction. Social media, video, games. I'll share something personal. I have a game that I really like to play. I like to play Risk. It's a game of world domination. Truthfully, sometimes I get lessons from it, but ultimately I like winning, and I'm playing against AI, so I've gotten pretty good at beating them. It has taken a mindful choice to set that aside to something that I do when everything else is complete. When I feel like I have used up my ability to make decisions, when I feel like I've checked most of the things on my checklist, when it's the end of the day and I have 10, 15, 20 minutes, then I will allow myself this mindless triggering of my limbic system. But it is a conscious choice. I make a conscious decision, right? Instead of having the urge come up and just doing it, I consciously choose to engage my limbic system in this way. So make the decision that you're not going to give into those urges until it's the right time and place. I've got guidelines about text messaging. I've got guidelines about email, that I only tap these things a couple of times a day and at certain times of the day, and then I set it aside. By creating structures for how you're going to use your screens constructively, and when you choose to, you stop becoming a servant to your limbic system, but you still get to engage it. Work on mindfulness. Have a conversation with your partner about date night or whenever it is that you're trying to connect. Talk about what's coming up. Be honest. Hey, honey, I got to tell you, when we're at date night, I'm thinking about all this stuff. I'm having trouble being present. I could really use some help. Let's talk about ways we can practice this together. When you're ready, start a meditation practice. When you're ready, start a prayer practice. Or all of the above. I've described mindfulness, meditation, and prayer as being steps in one into the other. It doesn't have to be. If you're really hooked on one, you can develop it and grow it. All of these practices, mindfulness, meditation, and prayer, studies of the brain have shown that the neural networks in your cerebral cortex grows when you do that, and your amygdala, which is the primary emotional trigger in your brain, shrinks. Or the neural networks become less developed in your amygdala. And you're less likely to be reactive when you do these things. So you want to do these things regularly. Screens, if used unconsciously, keep us in reactive mode, making it harder to be present and to be proactively responsive, to be carefully responsive in relationships. Redirecting our attention through activities like conscious choice, like mindful choices, like practicing meditation, like using prayer when it's appropriate. When we feel emotionally hooked, prayer can actually take us through it. These are the things that build up the parts of our brain that have been not as developed because maybe we've been in a mental wheelchair. And so when we use these things, we slowly, first we get out of the chair, then we take a couple of steps, and we take a couple of steps down. Eventually, we'll be running down the steps. Eventually, when we feel triggered, we'll just be able to say, hey, I feel triggered right now when this happens, because when I was a kid, I had this really traumatic experience, and it reminds me of that. So here's your call to action. Start out with one way you can reduce screen-driven reactivity in your relationship. It might be setting a boundary. It might be around your screen use, a simple boundary. Some people actually do social media fasts for a week. It might be practicing mindfulness. It might be starting a meditation habit, or it might be praying and asking God for help with this because you don't know where to start. Whatever it is, one thing, just pick one thing that you're going to do for the next week. I want to hear from you. Reach out to me. Go to richinrelationship.com, ping me directly there, and let me know how you're doing with this, or comment on this video, but give me some feedback on how this is working for you. I'm telling you, once you start on this journey, the stronger your cerebral cortex gets, the more amazed you're going to be at what you can accomplish, not only in your partnership, but in the rest of your life. This is the difference between being a lion and a lamb. Not that it's bad to be a lamb, but we want to be leaders in our life. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful tomorrow.